Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. So, I'm going to dive into an episode today, and I am going to draw some lines and make some connections that many of us may have not thought were there. But I know that when we draw these connections and we dive deep into this topic, they help us become more authentic, magnetic leaders, which really helps draw your people to you, whether that's clients you're wanting to draw to you or people you want to lead. And it will make you so much more effective at work and at home. And I'm going to use K-pop Demon Hunters to do it. Okay. How many of you guys have watched the movie, the K-pop Demon Hunters movie? If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. It is so good. So my son watched it and then my daughter watched it. And I actually wasn't sure what it was, but I drive carpool to school and I've kept hearing my daughter singing the songs in the back with her friend. And so I was like, oh, let me watch it with you. The music is so good, but the story underneath is even better. It is just so good. And one thing my daughter said that she's just so brilliant. She was like, man, these companies are so smart. They put in all these things for kids like music and cartoons. But then, because when we're watching the movie, I kept saying to her, oh my gosh, did you see that? Oh, do you know why she's doing that? And my daughter says, but actually, they give you all these lessons for the adults so that the adults go tell all their friends to watch the movie. Case in point, this podcast. Okay. Anyway, so in the movie, they talk about the theme of shame and they talk about it as kind of an undercurrent. It's not like in your face, but it is such an important lesson to learn about how shame keeps us small and really keeps us from living in our integrity or our authenticity. And when we are not living in our integrity and our authenticity, it keeps us at a lower vibrational frequency and really keeps us from living our truth and living at our biggest selves. So, all right, let me just give you, if you have not yet seen K-pop Demon Hunters, I'm going to give you just a very short background so that you sort of know what the movie's about. Okay, so the movie is about these three gals, and they eventually become a song group in Korea, and their whole point is to come together. They're sort of every generation, these three women are tapped to help keep Korea safe from the dark energy, essentially. And the way they do it is through song. So they create the perfect pitch, these three women together every generation, and their pitch comes together to create this like a protective layer around their people, their community, their country, the world. Okay, so how does this play a role in authenticity and shame? Well, the way the story is told is that the three gals of this generation that are singing, they are Korean pop stars. They each one of them has something that they're sort of hiding. One of them was like incredibly rebellious and pushes back against people. When she was growing up, she felt like such an outcast and an outsider. And she had that sort of persona of like, I don't care what you think about me. And one of the other gals is someone who's an incredible people pleaser. So she always felt like she was really into writing and words. And so she would spend a lot of time by herself as an introvert, writing things down. And she ends up being the lyricist of the group. And but because she felt so ashamed of the fact that she was such an introvert, she tried to compensate by people pleasing. And then the last one, which is sort of I would say sort of the star of the movie. I think her name is Rumi. So she is like the one that everybody loves. There's nothing Rumi can do wrong. But Rumi is holding the deepest secret of them all. So Rumi comes from a mom and a dad, and her mom was the prior generation's demon hunter. So she comes from someone that was fighting the darkness, but then her dad happened to be a demon. Da da da. So her dad was a demon, and because her dad is a demon, Rumi holds the skin marking that shows the world that there's something wrong with her. And her mom ended up dying when she was a little kid, as did her dad. And so she was raised by her mom's best friend. And the mom's best friend was trained to believe, obviously, that demons are bad, that the markings are bad. So she told Rumi, you got to hide those markings. And when you and this new group, you and your two friends, seeing the golden pitch, because the golden pitch is what keeps them all safe, your markings will be gone. Everything will be fine. So Rumi was taught to be afraid, to shame her markings. Okay, so let's put that to the side and we will come back to that in just a second. So how does that hiding what you are ashamed of, where does that show up for us now? Okay, so let's talk about authenticity and shame. Why? Because as humans, no matter what we are doing out in the world, again, whether we are leading teams, whether we're publishing research, whether we're running a business, your level of ease and your level of success is going to be directly related to your level of authenticity. One more time, your level of ease and your level of success is going to be directly related to your level of authenticity. Why is that? I'm going to teach you this term that comes from physics, and the term is called constructive interference. Constructive interference. Now, what that means is, I talk a lot about energy. We are all energy. We're working through an energetic field. And if you look at the most brilliant physicists of our time, even prior generations, they saw that the secret of the world is to start thinking in terms of energy and frequency because everything is energy. So there's this physics terms called constructive interference. Now, what constructive interference essentially explains is instead of destructive, I'm saying constructive interference, is that when two energetic frequencies, so if you think of an energy as sort of the sine wave going up and down, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching me do the sine wave. But if you think of two energetic frequencies as two energies that are kind of going up and down, when they meet each other, if they are at the same frequency, they amplify the energy. So the energy amplifies, it gets bigger. Okay. So think about the energy or the frequency increasing in size. Now, why is it important for a frequency to increase in size? A frequency doesn't have to, but if you want to have more impact in the world, and I know many of you listening, that is the reason why we're here. The reason why we're here is how do we live our purpose and have a bigger impact in the world? That's what we want to do in the world. So when you amplify your frequency, you are able to have a bigger impact in the world. Now, why is that? So think of frequency again. So frequency is just, these waves that are coming up and down. Think of frequency as a radio station. You know how radio stations can have many different stations. Each station is a different frequency. How can you tune into the frequency? You tune your dial to that frequency, right? And then you get there. So what if you're tuning your dial to a small frequency? Let's say a local station somewhere. You're driving your car, you're listening to a local station. And what happens when you drive out of the town? You lose the station, you lose the frequency because it's a small frequency. Now, what if you're listening to a national station, a national radio station? You can drive really, really far, and the station is still able to impact you because the frequency of the station is much larger. Now, that is what happens to us when we are able to amplify our own frequency. How do we amplify our frequency? Through authenticity. Now, how does that work? So again, you think of constructive interference. What happens with authenticity is two of our energetic frequencies are meeting. One is what we say out loud, so our words, and the other is what we embody, so what we believe about ourselves, so what we know to be true, and then what we say to be true. When those two frequencies meet and they are aligned, so we are speaking our truth, what I am saying out loud is actually who I am and what I embody. It creates a source of constructive interference. So it amplifies our frequency. And so when we are being authentic, or another way to say this is when we are in integrity with who we are, When we are in integrity with who we are, it amplifies our frequency. And when our frequency is amplified, we are able to have a much bigger impact in the world. Another example of this is kind of a funny example because so I'm going to talk about Howard Stern. So Howard Stern was a dude who was on the radio a long time ago and then became really famous because he was very authentic and he was very polarizing. So some people thought he was hilarious and great, and some people thought, oh my God, this guy's crazy. What is he saying? Either way, people liked to listen to him because they were like, what's he going to say next? So I like this example for two reasons. One, he's on the radio, and I literally just use the analogy of the radio. And what we see from his example is that in the beginning, when he first started off as a radio newscaster, he was on small local stations. And he was like most of us, trying to figure out, how do I speak on the radio? What do I say? I don't want to turn anybody off. I've got to be really careful. Like, think about you, especially when you were like new to leadership or new to your business or new to a role or a job. You really question yourself. Is who I am okay? Is who I am safe? Can I really say that out loud? Do I need to police what I say? Do I need to be careful? Okay. So that's how he started too. And he kept losing jobs. Like, nobody wanted to keep him. And then he started to realize how he would flow when he would not doubt himself, when he would not question himself, when he could just say what he was thinking and say what he was feeling. He started flowing. And when he was flowing, he was having much more fun doing it, but his ratings would go up. And eventually he got a job at a national news station in New York somewhere. I can't remember the name of the news station. And he became a huge national sensation. Yeah, I mean, say what you will about him. I'm not here advocating for or against him, but essentially what I'm saying is look at the example of what is possible when you lean into your authenticity. Now, so I have so many more examples of leaders, of entrepreneurs, of people that I have seen who are chugging along, doing fine, doing okay. They're pretty good leaders. They're pretty good entrepreneurs. But the moment they're able to tap into their authenticity, I'm thinking of the CEO of Vituity, who I love tremendously. He's a dear friend of mine. When he was able to tap into his authenticity, oh my gosh, everything skyrocketed for the entire organization as a whole. Why? Because you are coming from your truth, and when your truth is grounded on values that you can uphold, service, taking care of each other, things like that, that just amplifies how you show up in the world. So your frequency is amplified. Okay. So let me now come back to the concept of shame and how does shame play into all of this? Okay. So in its most simplest form, shame, and by the way, shame is not simple by any means. It's a very powerful force. But what shame does is this, in its most simplest form, it convinces us to play small. Shame is this powerful force, this energetic force that convinces us that we need to hide. Think about all of the examples of what we have been taught that we should shame. If you're a woman, for example, women and your sexuality, you should be ashamed of your sexuality. Women and money, oh, you should be ashamed of wanting money, liking money, desiring money. Women and power. Oh my gosh, who does she think she is? Look at her up there talking. And by the way, this does not just affect women. Think of all of the social programming for men as well. For example, one of the most obvious examples is men can't be emotional. They can't tap into their feelings. But if you think about a man who's been able to overcome this, think about that. A man who's able to firmly stand in both their divine masculine but also their divine feminine. When they can tap into both of those and hold that at both of that energy and say, yes, I can have a conversation with you. I can be vulnerable. I can share how I feel. And I can also stand in my strength and my power. That is so attractive. It's super sexy when someone can do both of those things. And that is the power of tapping into your own, whatever it is that you've been hiding. That is the power of tapping into that. Because when you can tap into that, into the things we have been taught to shame, things flip for us. Okay, so how does this play out in K-pop Demon Hunters? Okay, so again, the three gals, they were singing, and that one gal, Rumi, who had those dark marks on her, she was noticing as the movie's going on that the dark marks are spreading across her body. So first she could just hide them by wearing a shirt over them. Then she had to wear long sleeves. And then she started to notice that as her marks are spreading, her voice is losing its ability to hold a higher pitch, or the pitch she needs to create that seal to protect her community. And she is flipping out, and she won't tell anybody. She won't tell her two other BFFs, her best friends, that this is happening to her because, of course, she's been taught to shame him. So, because she's been taught to shame them, she keeps the marks hidden. But somebody finds out. Somebody finds out that she is part demon. Somebody sees those marks on her. And then they try to use those marks against her. Okay, let's pause really quick and talk about how that shows up for us. So, first, I want to ask you, what have you learned to believe you should be ashamed of? What have you learned to believe? Again, you were taught this. You were taught to believe you should be ashamed of it. What is that? And I say learn to believe very intentionally, because we were not born ashamed of who we are. We were not born ashamed of who we are. Somewhere along the lines, we were taught by either what we saw on TV, the books that we read, somebody at church, parents, whatever. Somebody taught you to be ashamed of this. Maybe it was a teacher. For me, for example, it was the fact that my parents were divorced. I was also taught to be ashamed of my dark skin, my curly hair, my curvy body, my Latin heritage, my sexuality, the fact that I like money, and on and on and on. So, what were you taught to be ashamed of? Now, in the movie, what she was ashamed of was used against her. I'm going to tell you guys about that at the end here, but what she was ashamed of was used against her. And the way it was used against her, what ended up happening is that person that saw it turned her against her two best friends, because together the three of them were unstoppable because they held so much love and acceptance for each other. Okay, again, what the person that was using this against her is, he used this against her by pitting what she was ashamed of and pitting her against her besties, her best friends that were singing with her, because they each held so much love and acceptance for each other. They each held so much love and acceptance for each other. Now, I'm going to talk about why that matters in just a bit. But first, I want us to pause for a second, and I want you to take a second to notice how we use what we are ashamed of against ourselves, just the way that that was used against Rumi. How is it that you use what you are ashamed of against yourself? For example, maybe you have a thought that you'll never be good enough or smart enough because of the color of your skin. That was my thought, by the way. And I know that this sounds total bananas, but I'll tell you that this is what is at the root of so many people's imposter syndrome. So many people who come to me that I work with that have imposter syndrome, at the very core of it is they don't feel like they belong, and they don't feel like they belong because somewhere along the way they learned that they shouldn't belong there, that they couldn't belong there, that they were not good enough or smart enough to belong there. So we were taught to be ashamed of something. So again, someone taught us that we needed to be ashamed of something, and then we believed it. And when we believe it, when somebody tells us that and we believe it, it keeps us playing small. Think about you. If you hold on to any imposter syndrome, what does that do for you when you are in rooms where you feel like an imposter? It keeps you likely from speaking up, from sitting at the table, from being your authentic self. And the worst of this is that after we believe this for ourselves, no one needs to tell us to be ashamed of it anymore, because now we are telling ourselves to be ashamed of it. And this is how systemic oppression works. Once we internalize what somebody has told us to believe about ourselves that is making us feel less than, we are now oppressing ourselves. We do the work of the oppressor. Okay, so I want you to notice what you might still hold as something to be ashamed of. Just pause for a second and ask yourself, what is it that I might still be ashamed of? This could be the way your perfectionism shows up. A lot of people say, actually, not a lot, but I once heard this and I thought it was just so brilliant, that perfectionism is just shame cloaked in gold. And I think that that is so true because in my experience, working through my own perfectionism, but working with my hundreds and hundreds of clients, perfectionism is something that we use as a shield to hide a fear that maybe we're not smart enough, or people are going to find out that we actually shouldn't be here, that we're not good enough. And so we use perfectionism to hide who we really are because we're ashamed of who we really are. Maybe it's you show up as self-sacrifice or lack of boundaries. Maybe that is the way you hide a fear or a shame that you're actually not worthy unless you are in service. How many of you struggle with setting boundaries, or you're consistently, constantly, always sacrificing yourself in the name of service? You're martyring yourself because you think that that is going to make you, that's moral. That's what you're supposed to do. But really what it's doing is it's probably hiding a fear that deep down inside, maybe you're not worthy unless you are in service. Or if you're a constant overachiever, the constant need to achieve. By the way, all of these I'm sharing as an example, they were all things that I see with my clients over and over again, but they were also me. All of these were also things that I had to really heal within myself. So the constant need to achieve or overachieve, hiding the fear that deep down, you're actually not good enough. So you're always trying to prove yourself. And by the way, I can go on and on and on here, but those are some of the most common ones. So what happens when we see these stories? When we first notice that we're still holding on to these stories? What happens when we notice we're still holding on to them is that we can then shed light on the stories. We can create awareness and shed light on the stories. And the reason why that matters is because the antidote to shame, the cure, the treatment to shame is light. Because shame only lives in darkness. Shame only lives in the dark. And when you shine light on that, when you shine light on what it is that you've been told to shame, there's nowhere for that shame to go. It has to be out in the open. And all of a sudden, the thing that we made so big is like this tiny little pieces. It's like the size of like a grain of sand. It is tiny. We realize, I actually don't need to be afraid of that. I don't need to be ashamed of that. Shame is holding those parts of us prisoner. They're holding those parts of us prisoner. And the way we get ourselves out of that prison, that mental prison that shame is holding, the key to that is light. When you tell the shame story out loud, it loses all of its power. You realize you were not at fault. You don't have to be ashamed of that. Even if it was something that maybe you were at fault of, you're able to forgive yourself. And the more you tell the story, that shame story that you held, that you were hiding, from a place of empowerment, not a place of victimhood, which is different, but from a place of empowerment, like, yeah, my parents were divorced when I was a kid. It stunk, but here I am. I decided I didn't want to be a victim to that. So I got married and I did the work to have an incredible marriage. The more you tell the story from a place of empowerment, the less power that story has over you. So how do we do this? Okay, first, we notice where in our life we might be playing small. Where are we still hiding? What is still keeping us hiding? What do you hope no one will ever find out? What do you hope to always have hidden? And some of these things are things that we've experienced in our own lifetime. But many of these things can be legacies we carry on from our families. We have so many legacy burdens that we inherit from our families, stories that we have been told that we don't talk about that or don't talk about that. Those things are passed down to us, and they also hold shame stories over us. It also puts those parts of us in prison. So what we want to do is, number one, notice where it is that that shame might still be living. And then number two, here's the antidote. You shine a light on it. How do you shine a light? You bear witness to it. And sometimes you are the one bearing witness to it yourself first. You can do this by just saying it out loud. Wow, I'm really ashamed that I'm not smart enough. And so I notice how I'm always trying to be perfect. Oof. Wow. Maybe you say it out loud like that, or you can also journal. Journal about what it is you are experiencing, what it is you are feeling. Journaling allows you to also bear witness, saying it out loud or journaling. And what you want to do when you do that is you, one, bear witness, but you want to bear witness from a space of safety. So safety means you do it from a place of compassion, of acceptance, of kindness. Do it from a place of how you would imagine if you were saying that to me, how I would respond. And let me tell you right now how I would respond. I would hold you with so much unconditional love and acceptance. I would see only your light and I would know, yeah, I get it. I held that too. I would validate you. I would hold you with unconditional love. I would see your brightness, your light. That's all I would see in you. And I want you to be able to do that for yourself. When you bear witness from a place of compassion, of love, of kindness, because that is who you are at your core. There is no judgment necessary. No judgment necessary. The reason we hold this in locked up inside of us, the shame, is because we are afraid we're going to be judged. But when you can meet it with compassion and curiosity, all of a sudden there's no judgment. The ego can rest. It can feel safe. And all of a sudden you might start thinking, wow, I can't believe I was still ashamed of that. That doesn't feel like it was that powerful. But, shame is sneaky. Shame is tricky. Shame can hold power over us. And that is why so many institutions have used shame to control people. So many people have used shame to control us because shame is powerful, but shame only lives in the darkness. So if you have a safe container, share it with somebody that you can share it with. And if you don't, share it with yourself first. You bear witness to it. You bearing witness to the shame has so much power, so much power. That is light enough. And if you have someone you can trust, a loved one or a trusted friend, share it with them. Once I started noticing how powerful it was when I would bear witness to it myself, I started doing this to everything. And then when I realized how much stronger it was when I had somebody else witness, I would go to my friends and say, "Hey, there's something I need to share with someone. There's something I need to share with you. And I want you to use these talking points if they resonate with you." This is what I would say to my friends. "Hey, there's something I need to share with someone. I just need to have it witnessed because I know witnessing can be healing." And I would say this, "I don't need your help fixing it." And I would feel really uncomfortable if you pitied me. "I just really want you to just bear witness. Just listen with compassion. Is that okay?" And when they would say yes, I would share with them what I was feeling and experiencing. And I blessed a very good group of friends. Sometimes I would share with my husband, my sisters. So find who it is that you need to share with. And if you don't have anybody, that's okay. Start with yourself. You be that person that witnesses it for yourself. Okay, let me come back to K-pop demon hunters really quick. So I said that they used that against her. They used her demon marks against her by pitting her against the people that loved her and held her and accepted her. Why? Because shame only lives in the darkness. And what ended up happening for her is once she made peace with her demon marks and she showed up to her friends loved her and accepted her. So then she was like, holy smokes, I don't need to be ashamed of this. They love me and they accept me. So I don't need to be ashamed of this either. And that right there is the power of witnessing. That is the power of witnessing. It's incredible. You can do this for yourself, or you can have somebody else that you love, that you trust, witness for you. And what happened to Rumi in K-pop Demon Hunters is that when she made peace with this, when she saw she didn't need to be afraid, what she did was she said, okay, well, I have two choices. I either hide myself off in exile because now these marks have gone all over my body and there's no way to hide them anymore unless I hide myself completely, or I let the world see who I am and I live my purpose anyway. This, again, is not said in the world, but this is essentially what ends up happening. And she chose the latter. She chose to live her purpose anyway. And when she did that, what ended up happening is her voice magnified. It was stronger. It was even more beautiful than it was before, because now she is coming in full aligned authenticity, coming from full integrity. And when she and her friends all sang now from that place, from her full place of authenticity, with their friends fully accepting her, guess what they did? They were able to create that golden song, that golden moment, and create that protection over her whole country. And that was constructive interference. They created constructive interference, which magnified each other's power. It magnified their ability to do good in the world. And that is what is possible when we show up with authenticity. So I want you to know that whatever it is that you are still hiding, I get it. Sometimes it can be really scary. But when you shine light on it, when you accept it as who you are, when you know, like a very deep knowing in your body, fully embodied, that there is nothing wrong with any part of you, there are no bad parts. There are no bad parts of you. You start to resonate at such a beautiful high frequency that you start magnetizing people. People want to tune into your frequency. They want to listen to you. That is how we start seeing how people start growing. In the world of entrepreneurship, you see people all of a sudden start growing, businesses start growing. You see leaders that are more and more effective. Why is that? Because they are coming from an in-tuned place of authenticity. With what they say is fully aligning with who they are. That is constructive interference. And that, sweet friends, is the power of self-acceptance, the power of self-compassion, the power of self-love. That is deeply embodied authenticity and integrity. Okay, sweet friends, I am going to leave you here. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, leave me a message. You can contact me directly now in the podcast app. You can hit that little link and you can leave me a message. But definitely share this episode with whoever you think would benefit from this, and leave us a review, because that's how people find us. All right, friends, I'm going to invite you now to go look into the mirror at the beautiful lights that you all are. All right, sending you all so much love. Until next week. Adios.